Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us. And on behalf of the California Department of Education Special Education Division and the Supporting Inclusive Practices Project, we'd like to welcome you to the fifth in a series of 7 weekly webinars focused on secondary transition and presented by members of the California Transition Alliance leadership team, families, and statewide support providers. Today's presentation will address the critical role of the family in transition planning. My name is Kevin Schaefer, Director of Program Support with the Supporting Inclusive Practices Project. For your convenience, we've muted all participants. If you are responding, please respond to all panelists and attendees. We'll do our best to address your questions, and we'll be adding live links to the resources in the chat box. Next slide. For this presentation and those scheduled over the next 3 weeks, we've created a Padlet of resources for you to access. Simply click on the resource you're interested in and download as directed. To access the Padlet, which we will continue to update, you simply need to add the web address and feel free to share it broadly. Be sure to join us next Wednesday, May 27th, for information focused on collaboration. So, without further ado, it is my extreme pleasure to introduce Kristen Wright. She is not only our State Director of Special Education, but a fierce advocate for equity and access for all students. She speaks from her professional practice, her personal experiences, and most importantly, from her heart. Thank you for joining us today, Kristen.
Thank you, Kevin. So good afternoon, everyone, and hello from Sacramento. I'm Kristen Wright, as Kevin said, California's Director of Special Education at the California Department of Education. I'm also the proud mother of a 21-year-old daughter now, Shelby, with disabilities. And so I too am living through many of the similar experiences that many of you are while we're trying to figure out what does transition service look like in this era of distance learning, when we're used to having the community as our classroom and playground. It is such an honor to open up this webinar with such an esteemed group of presenters. I cannot wait to hear from this incredible group of youth from across California. And I am in absolute awe of the accomplishments of Kevin and Chris and Olivia and Sean, our presenters, and their mothers, whose advocacy, along with the self-advocacy of their children, have really paved the way for so many families traversing the special education landscape in our state and nationally. So I want to acknowledge that this webinar comes at a time none of us could have imagined. This COVID-19 pandemic has turned some of our traditional practices and modalities on their side and really have forced us to regroup as we think about what transition services look like in the distance learning framework. So in many cases, and sometimes feeling this way at home, that it is less than ideal since, as I mentioned before, so many of our transition age youth, the community is their classroom, as is their job sites. But one thing that we do know is that in special education, we are used to thinking out of the box and maximizing whatever opportunities we have. And that's what we've seen start to occur. I've heard from families that they've taken this time to become reintroduced to their now young adult children that have spent a lot of time away from them at school and have leveraged some of this time to work on communication goals, on routines, on self-help and self-advocacy skills, and the use of assistive technology to stay connected to the world. But there are some things that haven't changed with this pandemic. We still have students that are getting older and moving into the next phase of their journey after high school. And we need to make sure we honor that and we do our best to prepare them to be instrumental, visible, included members of our community. So in California, distance learning or in person, we will continue our mission toward inclusion, toward backward mapping our goals for self-advocacy, community inclusion, and work, and all children with and without disabilities having the opportunities to realize their dreams. And this has to start in preschool, where we welcome all of our wonderful diversities of children and families into our schools, whether it be in person or through distance learning. So I am going to stop talking and hand it off to our presenters because that is the meat of what we're here for today, and just want to appreciate all the work of the wonderful transition partners that we have, and as well as our Supporting Inclusive Practices project. So Kevin and Kristen, back to you.
Thank you, Kristen. This is Sue Sawyer, and I'm with the California Transition Alliance. We really appreciate the message that we really need to focus on the role of the parent in transition and helping their young adults make this transition, because the day they leave school is the day they start transition, and parents are frequently in charge. So we appreciate your message, and it is my great pleasure to introduce the next presenters. Cheryl Fortunato and her son Kevin, and Ellen Colston and her son Chris have been members of the California Transition Alliance team for several years. They have come to California, they've done presentations at our institutes, and at our last institute, Chris and Kevin, with the support of their parents, organized the Youth Strand to equip students with the skills and the talents to really pursue self-advocacy, to learn how to be their self-advocate, and to pass that baton to other people. So we are pleased to share this video from these presenters, and go ahead and roll the video.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Fortunato. And hi, I'm Ellen Colston.
Hi, I'm Kevin Fortunato.
Hi, I'm Chris Colston.
So we only have a limited amount of time, and we know how much our parents can talk, but Chris and I want to share with you all the amazing parts about self-determination and transition.
And help understand that parents have a role also.
So Chris, you and I have the amazing pleasure of going around the world to national and state conferences about the importance of self-determination, self-advocacy, and transition.
And we're really good at it too. And here's our business cards to go along with it.
One of our favorite things about public speaking is that after every single speech, lots of people come up to me and Chris and say, I want my students or I want my kids to be just like you guys.
Yes, the ability to speak up for ourselves.
What we show them is what you, me, and our parents needed to see too. You know, most elementary school teachers probably have no clue the impact that they have on transition, but I'm telling you, once they hear me speak, no doubt about it that they sure will.
You're right, Kevin. We are the best teachers also, and we are also the best messengers because
we've walked the journey. Hey, Chris, let's shift here. Can you tell us about your transition journey?
So let's talk about your transition plan. So everything started for us when we started to go to transition conferences, right?
That's correct.
So, and we learned what your role was in transition, and I learned what my role was in transition. And what was the one thing we learned about at those conferences? Was it informational interview?
Informational interview. That's the key.
That's right. The informational interview. We noticed in your interest, what do you and Grandpa like to collect?
We like to collect prayer cards.
Right. So we go to a lot of funerals, and we thought, hey, maybe that might be a career for you. So we, through our social capital, we found somebody to ask. Right. So you wrote them a letter, and then what you got to meet with them, and what were some of the things you asked him?
What was your career path?
And how you got in the field.
And how you got in the field.
Right. And then he showed you a tour. You loved it. And then what did he ask you? Hey, do you want to?
Hey, would you like to work this Saturday at a funeral? I said, yes, sure, I can.
Right, so it was
He
a
said,
job
be there
shadow.
at 3, and then it was a job shadow.
And you loved it,
And
right?
I loved it.
So you job shadowed 2 days, and what happened then?
And then he asked me at the end of the second funeral, would you like to come and work here? And I said, yes.
Absolutely. You
Absolutely.
loved it. Okay, now let's fast forward. What was your next job?
I worked at Christiana Hospital as a patient escort.
And then what made you stand apart from the other applicants?
Doing more calls, because when you're a patient escort at a hospital, you have to go up to the room that the person or patient passed away, and you got to take their body down to the morgue. And I had no problem with it since I had experience at the funeral.
Absolutely. So you have all these strengths that you could do that I couldn't do. So now you're working at the hospital, and then where are you working now, Chris? Because this informational interview kept paying forward. So what are you doing now?
I work at the DelDOT Department of Transportation in the state of Delaware. I'm a PPM1. I do building maintenance. We do roadway lighting, I should say. put poles up if they got hit, go up in the bucket truck. I've been up in the bucket, changing lamps, ballast, and also plow in the wintertime when I'm your Del Dot Snow Fighter, they call us.
Wow. So Chris, everything changed after that conference, right? We just knew things differently. So what do I always say?
Practice, practice, practice before leaving high school.
That's true. But what else do I always say?
Carpe diem, seize the day.
No. What else do I always say?
Pay the rent on time.
Chris, what do I always say?
Raise the bar high.
Absolutely. Raise the bar high on Chris, right?
Yes.
What do you think? Kevin,
Yeah.
take it away?
Kevin, take it away.
Don't you remember, Kevin, when we were working on your transition plan and we met with Ellen and we went through that extensive discovery process?
Mm-hmm.
And it hit the nail on the head. It told us exactly what you had been saying all along. What was it? What did you want in your future?
I wanted to be a preschool teacher assistant.
Bingo. But you know what was so important, Kevin? The capacity needed to be built in me as a parent as well as you as a student.
Mm-hmm.
Because remember, those tools that Chris showed us about, self-determination, and then knowing that you were going to be in the driver's seat of your life journey. After you leave school, I've been the coach, but I couldn't tell you what to do. There are so many different areas to be involved in, but you're the one that has to be in the driver's seat. I'm there to support you in the ways that you need support, right?
Right.
And Kevin, what was it? What worked for you that made certain that you were on the path towards living the life you wanted to live?
Self-determination was the right way, Mama.
Absolutely. And what do you always say about self-determination?
It's my oxygen. I never leave the house without it.
Can't go a day without using self-determination tools. And you know what, Kevin? Boy, weren't we lucky when we met Chris. Because you know all those years when I would cry at IEP meetings and I'd say, someone give me the answer. Can't you just show me the crystal ball? Well, guess what? I'm looking at my crystal ball. It's you. All the answers were right there in you. And guess who told me all about that? Mr. Self-Determination, Mr. Self-Advocate, Mr. Chris Colston, another messenger, the best messenger, just like you now are the best messenger to those elementary school students. We needed to see it in people that have walked in your shoes.
I used to think that my disability was everything about me. I mean, I was under the impression that I was nothing other than my autism until Chris Colston here. He was my shining light. He was the one that taught me that I am so much more beyond my disability. I have strengths, talents, and God-given gifts like every other human being does, regardless of a disability. Your disability is such a small part of you, and we need to make the mind shift and look beyond the disability and focus on what a person can do, not what they can't do. The secret ingredient was self-determination. But then when my mom started labeling for me, at first I was like my mom started labeling everything for me, like, Kevin, this, that is self-determination. And I would be saying to my mom, everything's self-determination. But then sooner or later, I was starting to make the connections of self-determination. My mom wasn't the one making the connections for me. In fact, I was messaging my mom saying, Mom, look what I did today. Look at this, look at that. Self-determination. Self-determination is now implanted in me. It's written all over my face, and now I make the connections wherever I go. And now because I have it, I'm passing it along to the next person who deserves it, because we all deserve it. Well, unfortunately, we're running out of time here, but we wanted to share one last thing. I'm a preschool teacher assistant, and I bring self-determination to my kids every single day because transition starts day one. Who's with me?
I'm with you.
Yeah. So, when I think back, I've learned that my role really is about being a coach for Kevin. And that came about once I was informed. The fear went away because the answers were always right here from Kevin. We were armed with the tools. That was the self-determination. And here we are 2 years out since your graduation. And it's incredible to see the continued growth. Because just like me, an old lady, I'm still growing, right? We all transition isn't a one-time thing. We have ongoing transitions in our life. And that's what's been rewarding for me as a parent, to see the continued growth and to understand I don't need to be fearful. And my role is to be a supporter, to see you go after your goals, your dreams, and to shift away from what I can't do, right? Because no one goes after what they can't do. It's always based on what you can do and what you're good at.
Amen.
So, I might not have that crystal ball, but what I do have is hindsight and 2020. And if I could go back and if I could impart the best learning on parents starting in their journey, is to start day one and to see a Kevin and Chris. That's what I needed to see. I needed to see what was possible, and then he needed to see what was possible. And starting early, we got lucky. Kevin was 17, 18 when he met the Colstons and we went through Discovery. But I often think, wow, what could have been possible had we started early? All of the fear that I had, it would have been gone. No different than my daughter who didn't have a disability. It doesn't have to be fearful. So that would be my parting words of wisdom, to start like Kevin does now with his students as a preschool teacher. Transition begins
Day one.
That was great. Thank you, thank you, thank you. What a history, what a perspective, what a great way to start our messages for today's webinar. I've had the blessing of watching Chris and Kevin expand their knowledge, their comfort level, their ability to navigate, and it's been fantastic. So really, we're excited to share another family, Olivia Adams and Patty Adams. Patty and I talked before the call, and we realized we've known each other for over 32 years in a professional working relationship. So to help everyone, we did start when we were 16, and it's all good. So Olivia is going to share her story. And as we hear Kevin and Chris, listen to Olivia from a perspective of how did Olivia and the family navigate life, IEP, IPP, IPEs, collaborating, partnerships, growing up, and going the next step. If you move to the next slide, please.
Hi, just before we get started, Richard, with them, he said we want to thank our East Coast partners, but we want to take a minute and ask you to jot down some things that you heard from them or saw with them. They gave us some great examples, they shared some insights, some things they do differently, some things they worked, how it was person-centered, and they're not done yet. Both of those young men are well on their way. So as we're going to hear these three more families talk from California, I want you to take a minute before Richard and his partners start to just write down a couple examples or a couple ahas that you got from that video. And thank you again to our East Coast partners. Next slide, please. And next slide, please.
Thank you, Vicki. And yes, we're all using the chat box. We have a team from CDE, SIP, the Alliance, so we love it. And as Vicki said, keep the chat box going. We use it as a way to collect information, collect highlights, have perspectives. So thank you, Vicki. I appreciate that. So Olivia, I'm going to turn it to you. I know you have a great PowerPoint, and then your mom and I may do some question and answers at the end of your segment. But Olivia, thank you very much for being with us. Thank you very much for taking it. Can we move to the next slide, please?
Hello, my name is Olivia Adams Faulkner, and this is my presentation.
Next.
My name is Olivia, but most people call me Liv. I am 22 years old. I live in Diamond Bar, California. I live with my mom and my older sister, Tyler, and my two dogs, Maxie and Dodger. My older brother, TJ, lives in Washington, D.C. I am adopted. My mom got an email saying that this little girl needs a home. She has Down syndrome and a hole in her heart. My mom knew right away that I was her daughter. I was fully included in general education classes starting in preschool through middle school. I was excited but nervous to start at Diamond Ridge High School, the school my brother and sister attended. I had many accommodations and modifications when I began high school. Here are a few: extra time, reduced amount, visual supports. I focused on 5 key concepts per unit, modified literature books, and modified tests. I had the following supports: a support person in all of my classes, an inclusion teacher, and a case carrier at the high school. This is my class schedule for my senior year: English 4, Government and Econ, peer counseling, choir, and cooking. Free 6 period, this is what I wanted. My successes: made the varsity soccer team, made advanced women's choir, and went to homecoming with friends. I worked at Old Navy through the workability program, and I had a job coach help me. I went to prom with 2 of my best friends, Noelle and Chanel. We met on the soccer team, and we went to prom on a party bus. I graduated from Diamond Ridge High School in June 2016, and I earned a diploma. My dream was to attend college. We had a map-making action plan meeting at my house with family, friends, and university people to help come up with ideas for going to college. I really wanted to go to Cal Poly Pomona, mostly because my best friend goes there, and we made a plan to start at a junior college first. I'm excited to share that I was able to start attending my dream school, Cal Poly Pomona, in 2018. I enrolled through Open University. Admission to the university is not required. These are some of the classes I have taken: acting, career, and exploration class, several gender studies classes, film, and peer theater. My first support person was a Cal Poly student who was working on his master's in the area of transition. The rest of my support people have been Cal Poly students who I meet through my friends. I had a job developer through Department of Rehab. I was hired at TJ Maxx in June 2017 and worked until October 2019. I had a job coach through Department of Rehab. I worked at 8 to 12 hours per week, usually on the weekends. I did flat stacking, some customer service, and cleaning. I became very independent. My job coach only checked on me occasionally. I enjoy doing advocacy work for people with disabilities. I often speak to future teachers in university classes and give presentations at conferences. Here's a picture of my birth grandparents who came to see me give a presentation at CalTASH. I'm an ambassador for the National Down Syndrome Society. I have gone to Washington, D.C. twice and participated in meeting with members of Congress as part of my ambassadorship. I recently was asked to join the board of a nonprofit organization called Club 21, an organization that supports people with Down syndrome. I'm enjoying meeting and making friends with other people with Down syndrome. These are my life goals: have my own gallery to show my photography, become an actress. I want to live in New York City, and my dog Maxie will live with me, and I would like to get married.
Olivia, thank you. And I have been blessed to be part of her mission, her goal, the person-centered plan meeting she talked about. There were a large number of us in the back room, the solarium at the house. And just like Olivia said, we all came together. We all had open minds. It was really neat to see the siblings have some unique perspectives that really helped along those lines. So I think, Olivia, the next week we're going to present on collaboration and partnerships. This also represents that. You and your family, your mother, and the system have really worked with partnerships. And I know that Patty will share a little bit more with her slides, but Patty, if you can kind of talk about that balance of inclusion, family, natural, that would be great. Thanks, Patty. Dr. Adams.
Like Liv said, she was included since preschool all the way through high school. And, you know, the inclusive model is a balance between being included in a classroom and yet being able to focus on, you know, learning those academic skills that are very, very important. We focused all our energy and time on inclusion, and so she, as part of the family, did everything her siblings did. Girl Scouts and soccer and, you know, music classes and all of those things. And she grew up with a rich group of friends that are kind of sustaining her through adulthood. You know, looking back on it now, one of the pieces that has been missing in her peer group are other friends with disabilities. So looking at that beautiful friendship that the two gentlemen just shared, you know, she was so included with Gen Ed that she didn't have a lot of peers who could relate to maybe some of the struggles that she had as a person with a disability. So she's really enjoying making friends now who have Down syndrome and kind of sharing common experiences. Looking back on our journey, we are 4 years out, and you know, I think it's important to look at the big picture. When we're looking at skills and things we want our students to do, it's important, you know, in special ed, we focus so much on minute skills, right? That sometimes the big picture skills get lost you know, being able to make choices, being able to transition. For us, the priority from day one was to have friends, that she had to have relationships that would sustain her through school. And some of the other stuff wasn't as important to us. Fully included kid means fully included parent, right? So, you know, just as I was for the other kids, but particularly for her, you know, I was the PTA mom, I was a Girl Scout cookie mom, I was the choir booster parent. All of that being said, that created relationships with people that provided Olivia opportunities. So when we didn't have transportation to high school, we had a mom that I met through PTA who was able to do that in carpool. When Olivia really wanted to try out for the school soccer team, and to be honest, mom was very nervous about that, she was supported and embraced because the varsity soccer coach had her as in his English class and saw her work ethic and her determination. So the more relationships you have with people, the more opportunities your child will have, especially in high school. Liv started participating in her own IEPs when she was in the 6th grade. She gave full presentations for her junior and senior year. In order to be able to do that, she had to be able to talk about who she was, what she did well, which was very easy for her, but also talking about Down syndrome and understanding that there were areas in her learning where she needed that support. She was comfortable in doing that because we've been talking about that since she first asked what Down syndrome was. She was about 5 years old. But I think that participation in IEPs is so important, especially as you're looking at transition. So it really gives your student an opportunity to prove their competency or show their competency, right? You know, you have to pick your battles in inclusion. Richard talked about that balance. You know, Liv had desperately wanted to do a sign language elective. We thought it would be the perfect opportunity for her, and the teacher just could not wrap her head around Olivia's IEP accommodations and modifications. And so, you know, we chose at that point, it wasn't a battle to pursue, and we changed classes. You know, you can't fight every battle. You do need to, as parents, find people to celebrate with, right? Find people to celebrate the small steps, to celebrate the inclusiveness, and to commiserate with when things maybe don't go as well as we had hoped. And looking back 4 years later, I can say the biggest takeaway for me is I really shouldn't have worried so much. Liv is very brave. Our kids are brave. Our kids are resilient. And she did fine. We are now, if you want to go to the next slide, we are now facing the world of adult services. And I feel as if for inclusion, I had a marathon to run, right? Like I had to get through K through 12. I had a clear, you know, finish line, which was the high school diploma. I had a team of people who believed in inclusion. I had a coach who was an amazing inclusion teacher. And I feel like I crossed that finish line and we went, woohoo, and we celebrated. And now someone says to me, okay, well, guess what? You get to do another marathon. It's longer this time. There's really no goal in sight. And by the way, you have to figure out how to do it yourself. So it's a big learning curve figuring out the adult system. It doesn't have the structure or the predictability that we have with K-12. Parents are left to be case managers and to navigate, which means kids' opportunities and services as an adult really depends on the family's ability to navigate the system. So I've learned to ask questions. For example, I just happened to bring up at Regional Center, "Guy, do you guys ever pay for Uber? I'm spending a fortune on Uber for Olivia." And they said, no, we never pay for Uber. And then I went, why not? And so, of course, the answer is yes, Regional Center can pay for Uber, and Olivia is the first person at Regional Center to have Uber funded. But that just simply happened because I asked the questions and challenged the answers. And then finally, you know, the concept of dignity of risk. When I knew Richard and I was a 24-year-old teacher working with parents of young adults, you know, I certainly knew everything. I didn't understand these protective parents. And, you know, I said, your kid needs to have the dignity of risk. And how I didn't get smacked at some point in my teaching career, I'm not quite sure. Because as a parent, I see it through a very, very different lens and understand their, you know, their concerns, you know, certainly much better now. But I think it's important that we allow for risk. The key is being able to create the supports in place that allow our young adults or our older adults to take risks safely and with the correct support. Thank you for having us. We appreciate both of us appreciate being here.
Olivia, yay. Thank you. Olivia and Patty, major thanks. We're getting a lot of good vibes in the chat box. You guys are great. We will have time, if there is time at the end, but I just think as I have walked near you, around you, and sometimes side by side, moving through the different environments has been huge. And Olivia, like Chris and Kevin, I don't want to say this out of disrespectful for the three of you, but if we looked 5 years ago or 10 years ago, what you were at, what you were looking like, etc., to have you presenting with confidence as you did today, and you and I have presented other places, is huge, as well as with Chris and Kevin. So thank you. Another young man that we have watched grow and expand is Sean. And Sean and his family are going to share, but let me turn it over to Annabelle. Annabelle works for the Solano County Office of Ed, Workforce Development, TPP, and Workability. She is on the California Transition Alliance Board, has a great living perspective of navigating with diverse kids. So Anna, if you take yourself off mute, it's all you. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Richard.
Okay, hi. So I'm here to kind of introduce Kenda Tucker and Sean Kilberg. Sean came to our adult program in 2017, and he was so outgoing and just so friendly and happy that it was so hard not to like him right from the beginning. He initially would walk around our parking lot putting his hands out like he was Spider-Man when he was delivering food from our student store to the different classrooms on our campus. And I met his mom at our first IEP, and then got to know her a little bit better when I was able to take Sean to do a volunteer job at our Dixon Mayfair, where he was working with Access Adventures. Oh, next slide. Where he had he was helping with the horses in a buggy and hayride that's accessible for people with disabilities and in wheelchairs. And he was chosen to be one of 5 students from our county office that were able to attend Lodi's film camp with Joey Travolta. Next slide. Sean was great at film camp. He actually was able to be on 2 of our local TV channels promoting the premiere. And from these camps, he actually the first camp he attended, then we had another camp with us and at the county office, where he again was on camera to go on to the local news channel promoting our premiere. And from these, he participated as the keynote speaker in the Bridge to the Future. Next slide. He, at the Institute, he met RJ Mitty and Derek Shields. Derek was so taken with Sean that he invited him to attend a symposium in Mountain View by LCA 2.0, and it was a networking symposium. He was then interviewed and hired by Derek to become a project assistant with the Let's Work California project. Next slide. Derek was so taken with Sean that he actually wrote an article with RJ and Sean that has been published. And Sean looks forward to possibly doing a bit more public speaking with Derek at some point. Next slide. So Sean has support from the Workability One, TPP, and he also had a PIP through Regional Center. His PIP, he was very independent when he was working. He was taking the local paratransit from school to work, and then if he didn't have the paratransit to take him home, he would get a ride home from his folks. Sean has grown so much since he has come to see us. He participates regularly in Special Olympics. And as he was finishing his last couple years of his classes, he was actually facilitating his own IEPs. And I think I'll let Sean talk to you a bit about that. But through all of these adventures that Sean has been on, his family has been there to support him 100%. I am really honored to have Sean and his mom be here to present about their process with the IEP and how the experiences that they've had over the years. So next slide, Sean and Kenda.
Thank you, Ms. Anna. So when I first did the IP meeting, I started like doing my PowerPoint by myself because I wanted to presentation my PowerPoint, and after I did that, I felt really good. And I started doing my presentation at Bridge to the Future. I was a little nervous at first, but I took a few breaths and keep my cool. So I came with a piece of, I read off a piece of paper, and I remember the
speech to read.
I had a speech to read, and I came up with a joke. Then my apartment comes with a wife, and then that's like,
as we started discussing transition early on, meeting Anna and the gang, Sean started understanding that at some point he would be moving on and potentially moving out. And his major concern with all of that upheaval was if his apartment would come with a wife.
and then that's, and when at first I was like I've always wanted it to be like moving to different like places, and when at first I did when I had worked with a
what are you working on now? What is your current project?
Bringing my future to life.
All right, but what do you do on Tuesdays?
Make YouTube videos with Derek, and yesterday I couldn't do it because I wasn't ready.
So Derek and Sean have moved forward to another level, and we actually seen in the chats, we got a shout out, someone recognized the YouTube. We're hoping to get a lot of followers and a lot of likes, and it's about that path to navigate the workplace, navigate how to make connections, navigate, what do you say, advocacy?
Advocacy.
Yeah, so it's really funny, it's fun to watch this whole process, but going back to the supports for the parents, as we have there on that slide, this was kind of hard to go back to. Sean's journey, it was a tough one for us. He was.
Yeah, I agree with. I agree with my mom right here because I really would like my future to work at an amusement park and doing more movies and film camps and be able to go to Hollywood.
Yeah.
And be famous and all that, and hopefully that comes to real life soon. And so I got my mom here to back me up and so make my future to come true, and I just love her.
Can I do my part now?
Of course.
Okay, great. In order to be a good coach, as you see, Sean doesn't need much coaching. But in the beginning, I never was prepared. As Kristen started, that this COVID-19 is very unexpected and we were not prepared for it. And I was just as unprepared to have a child with disabilities. So I was in the dark from the get-go. And no one really acknowledged the physical, or they acknowledged the physical disabilities, and he was receiving services right off the bat for that. But there was no preparation for the intellectual component of that. It was never even discussed. So as a parent, having a mentor to be able to coach him through his challenges, through his development, through his growth, would have been an amazing resource for a parent to have. Parents need other parents who are going through the same thing. We were in such a sheltered environment. We were living in Okinawa, Japan. There wasn't many families around with children, much less with children with disabilities. And because of the stigma on that, there was more of I didn't want to bring it up or mention it because there was a stigma and there was shame settling behind not being successful with having this perfect kid. I was very young and very immature, and it took a lot of years for me to move forward. And my mother said the greatest thing when I was feeling sorry for myself. Why did I have this kid when, teenage girls get perfect babies? My mom said, because a teenage girl couldn't handle him. He was given to you, for you to take care of. Now quit feeling sorry for yourself and take care of him. So the places that we lived didn't have folks that were in the same situation. And the education system in Nevada where we were isolated children with disabilities. And so we didn't even have through the school system mentors to help us. They kind of just put them in a room and let that be their day. We need to have established tools to be able to coach with consistency. It's very difficult to know how to support him and encourage him when on the outside, Sean's always looking happy, except for some reason in this video. And because he's always happy, it's easy to navigate our life because Sean's gregarious and bubbly and everything's great. As this COVID happened, he made a YouTube video on his personal YouTube channel. And it's very depressing and it's very sad, and it's so not Sean, because he was telling the viewers he was lonely. And he didn't have anyone to talk to, and he didn't have anyone to hang out with, and he couldn't go do sports. And it was such a wake-up call that I'm coaching him to be constantly bubbly, and I've never given him permission to feel his emotions, to share his emotions, because that's how we came up and just developed it. It wasn't, something struck in stone. It's just how we grew. So to know as a parent that you have to coach them to find those emotions. You have to coach them to control the emotions. You have to coach them to know it's okay to be frustrated and to cry. And through the Golden Hills program, Sean has been given that permission. And I've seen him grow into such a dynamic and versatile young man, as opposed to just the bouncy, gregarious Power Ranger. So that has been tremendous for us. The next slide, please.
And so, like Mom said, for my future, I want to be in a lot of Power Rangers movies to defend the Earth.
Do this part. See, we're talking
what
parents need.
My My parents need like.
No, I'm the parent.
Oh.
I'm gonna say
Lol.
parents need. So support parents need to support is that sounding board. It's so much about community and so much about not being alone in the dark. Again, that sounding board, listening to these conversations now is just really inspiring because we're about to transition out. And as Patty said, it was terrifying. And now you look back and it wasn't so bad. We're on that cusp of, I don't know if I can handle this. I can't handle thinking about it sometimes because you just don't know. It's that fear factor and I can't even put words to it. And this is so reassuring and so helpful as a parent to have these sounding boards to talk about our highs, to talk about our lows, and to be able to support our individuals by not keeping that inside us and perhaps taking it out on them. So huge support. We need a community enthusiastic to support his goals and dreams. I've been told up until the last 6 years not to expect much from Sean. To keep him guarded, not to let him in the world, have no expectations from the education community, from the medical community. These were what I was told for the better part of 15, 16 years. And when we came to California, I didn't expect anything different. But that changed drastically and suddenly. And it was very overwhelming because all of a sudden we went from living day to day to there's this whole person in here and they're peeling back the layers. And every time you come home, there's this new talent. He found out he had goals and dreams. I never helped him find them because I was told there wouldn't be any, but I didn't have that mentoring to tell me as a parent, be strong and don't look at him as different. He's not that different. He's just Sean. So being able to have that community, we have that community now, and it really supports his goals and dreams. And you've seen, he's done so many amazing things in the last few years. I can hardly keep up. Of course, we have to have the dog alarm. We need those tools to explore capabilities, to find what those dreams and goals are, regardless of what the world tells us to expect. So I have so much more expectations of him. The world is endless now. His world is endless now. And even with that fear, I know he's going to be amazing down the road. Next slide. Well, he's already amazing now, I suppose.
Thank you so much, both of you. What a great story. And Sean, it's so fun to see you on the YouTube and the work you're doing with Derek and Mom. Give him a hand, guys. Thank you both. Okay. With that, I'd like to introduce this wonderful, amazing lady. I met her in 1991. She was a local hotel, restaurant, events manager, and I was new to the community. She was participating as a training site supervisor for students in our workability program. She called me. She didn't know me. She called me because she was concerned about a workability student she had at her place of business. Short time later, Linda became a hospitality teacher for ROP in 1997. In 2000, she took on the role as our Workability 1 director, and yet another opportunity arose before that, and she coordinated our youth employment services. She now is the coordinator of career and technical education, both in the K-12 and adult education for the county. I did not meet her as a parent or a parent with children with disabilities until her kids were in middle school, and the rest is history. With that, I welcome Linda Riggle, the most amazing ally a youth could ever have. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vicki. Can everybody hear me? Yes. Hello, everybody, and thank you for taking the time today to listen to this presentation. I hope to bring you some insights, best practices, and inspiration to continue to walk what can sometimes be a very difficult walk, with small milestones along the way and outcomes that you may not see for many years to come. I want to start by telling you a little bit about my family. I was married right out of high school, 2 weeks after my high school graduation. I gave birth to my daughter 2 weeks after that. And I also inherited a stepson who was 3 years older than my child. 2.5 years later, I had my son. And we raised our family in rural Northern California in a town of about 5,000 people, the same community for which my husband then and I had grown up in. Next slide. This is the introduction of my children. Rebecca's on the left-hand side, and she's now 36 years old. She's married, a mother of two, Emma, age 9, and Alex, age 5. Anthony is on the right-hand side of the screen. He's now 34 years old. He's married, a father of 4. His children are Emily, age 18, Kylie, age 16. They were, they're children from a previous marriage of his wife, and he and his wife together have Aiden, age 10, and Abigail, age 6. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about my journey as a parent with kids with IEPs and learning disabilities. These are photos of my daughter Rebecca, aka Becca, which is what we call her. I learned very on, and I noticed very early on, that Rebecca had delayed learning and delayed speech. As a matter of fact, she didn't talk until she was about 4 years old. In a language that anybody could understand. She did have preschool, but it wasn't a very good experience for her. Primarily, it was a preschool that was held in a home, and they pretty much just watched Sesame Street all day. So that didn't really give her a great launch into kindergarten. When Rebecca got into kindergarten, I was able to participate helping in the classroom. And I discovered what I thought I already knew. Rebecca had pretty severe learning disabilities. And as a parent, I blamed myself. I thought because I was a teen mom, I simply didn't know how to teach my child. And I didn't do a good job at it. She had no interest in reading books. She had no interest in hearing stories. She had no interest in learning colors or her alphabet. And so I asked the teacher if we could do an assessment on her to figure out what was going on. And her teacher at the time said, she's probably just a late bloomer. Let's wait. So we waited about mid-year, and they finally did an assessment, and that's where we discovered that, yes, she had learning disabilities and she had sight problems. As you could tell, she's wearing some rather large glasses there. Next slide. So we started the process of learning what the IEP was all about. And this was completely foreign to me. As a young mom, I went into the IEP meeting and I basically didn't say anything. I leaned on all the experts to tell me what to do, to tell me what processes I need to do, to tell me what was right for my child. But I didn't understand my role there. I wouldn't talk, and I basically would nod my head most of the time, yes, just in agreement. And it wasn't until the end of her kindergarten year that I really started learning what my rights were for my child. And I also learned that I may not agree with the IEP team. And I started making a list of questions and ideas that I had that I would take to the IEP. And I had high expectations for my child. And I think I've already heard this early on, but the one thing I wanted was for her to be what we considered, quoted, normal. And I really pushed and tried to keep her most inclusive. Next slide. So it was the summer between Rebecca's kindergarten year and first grade year. She was still far behind going into first grade, but we were able to get some in-home supports, which came through the county office. They provided a speech and language therapist that would come to my home and work with Rebecca in the home and gave me ideas for engagement, things I could do to work with her. I also worked full-time, as did my husband, so we had childcare, who happened to be a retired teacher, so that helped as well. At the time, I didn't really think much about my son having disabilities. All the focus was on Rebecca. And many times when they were doing sessions with Rebecca, I would have to shoo my son out of the room because he was trying to take her thunder. Next slide. But little did I know, my son would also be diagnosed with disability in the first grade. So the reality was I had to navigate 2 kids with disabilities, 2 very different children with 2 very different sets of disabilities and 2 very different sets of personalities. So as I mentioned, Rebecca was diagnosed in kindergarten. She had memory, recall, auditory, and visual processing. She used to just say, "It's my eyes and my ears." She was everyone's friend. Everybody loved her, very social. Anthony, my son, on the other hand, wasn't diagnosed until the midway of his first grade year. He had ADHD, auditory processing, he had a lot with speech and language. And both the kids were mild mod, but Anthony was easily distracted. Next slide. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Rebecca's journey through school. Everybody liked Rebecca. She was, like I said, very social. She wanted to please everybody. She learned to self-advocate fairly early on. She was one of the first students in her class or in middle school to learn about leading a self-IEP or leading an IEP, student-led, and self-advocacy. So she had a very good group of friends. The hardest part for Becca going through her journey in school was that she didn't come across as if she had disabilities. We later called it hidden disabilities, but she was teased a lot because of her glasses, and Rebecca did very, very well in her grades. As a matter of fact, she graduated with a 4.0. That was a real high for her senior year, but it only lasted for moments when her very best friend walked up to her and said, "Your 4.0 doesn't really mean anything. You're in special ed." Next slide. So I also want to talk a little bit about Anthony's journey, my son. He did not connect very well with teachers. He was a very hands-on kind of kid, and he got in trouble a lot, but mostly because he was off task. Things were not interesting to him. School was not important, and he and I spent many days after school turning in assignments and catching him up and doing the things he hadn't done during the day. I learned very quickly that Anthony would shut down when he got overwhelmed. F's were not uncommon for him because he didn't finish his work. If he was assigned math problems in the evening, he might have 10 math problems. It would take us all night long to do the math problems. I learned that he would have to do, I could have him do maybe 2 math problems, and then he would have to take a break. He could go do basketball and come back, and then do 2 more, and then go take a break, and then do 2 more and go take a break. And literally it took us all night long to do homework. One of the things I was able to do to help was to start a homework club. So all the kids would come to our school or come to my home after school to do homework, and that helped him get through it a little bit better. Anthony was in a very close group of friends, all younger than him, so he was kind of the leader in his pack. He was quiet in school, and things didn't really even come together for him till high school. I was kind of concerned that he was even going to finish school, but he did graduate, and he graduated with a 2.5. Next slide. So as a parent, I'm going to come back to this one if I can. If we can go to the next slide, and then I'll come back to these things. I wanted to talk about the transition piece, because I've heard this today, and this is a really big piece of my kids' successes in their life today. Rebecca did workability quite a bit. She had about 3 to 4 different experiences in high school. Her first job in workability was working on a media crew where she was introduced to the love of photography. That got her to enroll in photography classes at high school, and she loved that, and that became her passion. Rebecca also did a workability placement for food service, and while she enjoyed it, it wasn't her first love, but it did land her a job as a hostess and got her to work during high school. Becca always loved kids, and she wanted to work with kids, and in her mind, she was going to be a preschool teacher. So she took child development, and she also worked in workability in our summer program as a child care assistant. And this landed her a job with the district as a high school instructional aide after school. She enrolled in Butte College, and that's where she earned her photography certificate while taking 48 units of child development. During this time, she got hired on with Walmart and became a department manager. Not very easy though. She had to try 3 times to even get the interview. She really had to fight, and that's where her self-advocacy skills really came in. So she ran the bakery, and over a course of years, she kept applying to become an instructional aide with Glenn County Office of Ed. And I'm happy to say that last year she was hired on to work with our Glenn Adult program in our 18 to 22-year-old program for adults with disabilities. And it's a perfect fit for her. So during this presentation, and Vicki asked me if I would talk, I decided to go and talk to my kids about their experiences, because I don't think we ever really sat and talked about what high school and what school looked like, and you know how it impacted them today as adults. This is what Rebecca said. Rebecca said, the hardest part of having a disability was being pulled out of my classes. I wish I had been mainstream more at a younger age. I believe that kids should be taught about their disabilities early on. Her strengths as an adult is her strong parenting skills, her determination, her drive, and her self-advocacy. They have all gotten her to where she's at today. The areas of support that I provide for Rebecca most is dealing with her stress. She has what she calls triggers, things that make her think about feelings that she had at an earlier age. They still come up as adults. I help her with her life management and her social anxiety, but overall, she's doing very well. Next slide. So I want to talk quickly about Anthony and his transition and life today. Anthony also did workability. He got his first job working in a restaurant. He did not like it, and he got fired. His second job was with workability, and he got to do a little bit of shop and welding. By this time, he was a senior, and he loved it. And he really did find his love of welding early on when he was in high school. He did go on to get a job at Burger King on his own, and I was surprised. He kept that job for a very long time while attending college. He went to Butte College for 1 year, got all of his welding certifications, and now he works as a welder, and he's been a welder ever since. And he lives in Reno, Nevada. So when I was asking my kids most recently, within the last couple of weeks, about their experiences, this is what Anthony said. He said, I didn't really care about having a disability, and my friends didn't care, so it wasn't that big of a deal. He even went on to say, and this is not in quotes, but he said to his sister, I can't believe you remember all that stuff. So his area of strength has been his network of friends. He has a very strong work ethic, self-determination, and he's very independent. The areas that I provide support for him most are money management and just being available for him when he needs me, when he asks, because he's not the kind of guy that asks all the time. Next slide. So if I'm gonna just talk briefly about my insights, that was a previous slide. I think it's 3 back, but, and what I want to leave you with, okay? One thing I didn't mention is that their father also had significant disabilities. And so I learned how to support with him and how to accept. I learned to have high expectations for my children's achievement. I did join a parent group, and I always taught my kids that their disabilities would not be their crutch. It would be the reason they would have to work harder to achieve things in life. And that was just the hand we were dealt. And we still talk about this today. I would suggest for every parent to stay involved with the school, be involved with the IEP, get to know every teacher, be in contact with them constantly, and track your kids' progress. Make sure that the students are as inclusive as possible, whether it be sports, events, homework club. Let them have a lot of different experiences. They may like it, they may not, but every experience helps build towards their future. Know your children's friends. Friends are going to be their biggest ally, but can also be the biggest hurt if they happen to say things that aren't nice. Be patient. Always be there to listen and be trustworthy. Provide encouragement and build self-advocacy and confidence in your children. Always provide honesty, but instill a reality and a hope for their future. And I always talk to my kids before and after every IEP, and I mean that before they were self-led by them. So going to my last slide, I'm just going to wrap it up with this. I got a little emotional when I put this piece together because I picked this graphic that says, when you can't look at the bright side, I will sit with you in the dark. And that was big for my kids. Be present, listen to them, and understand that, yeah, there's going to be some tough times going down this road. Life can be tough, but they need to be strong. And as a parent, you need to be strong right with them. Help them to learn to be resilient and stay resilient. I put the slide in the middle, or the graphic in the middle that says this too shall pass, because I have always said that to my kids. With everything we've ever come across that's been adversity to them, we get through it. And I say, even as adults to them, I still say, this too shall pass. So that's my message to the parents out there. And I just want to wrap it up and talk about real quick the presentation that was given last week. And I think Sue Sawyer said this. Children need hope, they need confidence, and they need trust. So if they have hope for their future, confidence in their daily walk, then they will trust that this too shall pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Nice job. Give her a hand. Okay, we've heard from 5 families, and I'm going to run through these next 4 or 5 slides just very quickly with less than 2 minutes so that Lonnie has enough time. So they're on the Padlet, and I want to make sure that you take the time afterwards. I hope you'll take the time to go to the Padlet and look more closely to them. But the main things we've heard include, we've heard listen, we've heard grow with your child, work from a strength base and respect. Next slide. We want to thank you all for sharing your journeys with us, both through the video and the live presentations, our young adults and their family. Next slide. Okay, so if you can remember the 3 A's as educators or agency partners, what do we need? We need approach, we need attitude, and we need atmosphere. And we can do that, but we have control over that as educators, and we really need to remember and be mindful of that. Next slide. Well, these are some suggestions of how we can involve families, what we can do. But the very first thing is we have to want them to be involved. And we have to not act like we know everything, all right? Now, please look over these again afterwards. Control your nonverbal messages as well as your verbal. Involve them from the beginning of the meeting. Don't wait till the end and ask them if they have anything to add. Next slide, please. Okay, sometimes parents are reluctant. So it gives you some things. If you've got a reluctant parent, meet with them, offer your time, listen and ask questions, take a non-adversarial stance, jot down notes, try not to react, be the first story home, know when the conversation is over, and be kind. These people are families and children, and they're doing this 7/24 for their whole lives, and we need to remember that as educators. Next slide, please. Okay, these are things that parents of families, that if you're an educator or an agency partner, you could share some of these with families to help them. You know, they want to, the more a family can tell us that they're willing to divulge a little bit about how their family rolls, what they're doing, their kids' hopes and dreams, what do they expect? To keep an open mind, to listen, to ask questions. I have to share, one of the parents that have presented today said, until we got to the adult transition program, no one has ever asked us what we thought or listened to us or cared, but you care. And so how different is that? So we want to make sure that when we're running these IEPs, that we help parents learn how to contribute. We had another parent say they didn't know what to do. So just keep that in mind. Next slide, please. With that, I would like to introduce Lonnie Anderson. She's an education specialist from the California Parent Training Center, and she has been a wonderful partner with the California Transition Alliance, a longtime member of the California Community of Practice and Secondary Transition, and we're very lucky to have her with it. Take it away, Lonnie.
Muted. Okay, unmuted. Right? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, you're good.
So thank you for inviting me to participate in my Parent Training and Information Center where I work to collaborate with a webinar. And first, I'd like to I encourage anyone listening to contact their local Parent Training and Information Center for more information. And at the end of my section, I'll share the information about how to reach each one of them. I'm from the one that's in San Jose, California. We cover 5 counties in the area, and I've been working with them now for almost 20 years. But first, I'm a parent. I'm a parent of 2 adult children with very different disabilities. One of them has a life-threatening illness that's a chronic health condition, and the other has some significant learning disabilities and language delays and an array of other kinds of learning issues. Both of them successfully graduated from high school. They're both living independently. They're both, one of them just got their master's, the other one is working full-time and currently working at home because of COVID. So like you said earlier, everything is kind of flipped on its side for families. And I have the good fortune of not only knowing my own situation, but knowing the situation from the many parents who call us and hearing many, many different stories and kind of helping people resolve things when sometimes they have missed things. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that first, then I'm going to tell you a little bit about what parent training and information centers are. So in certain points in my own children's school attendance, I had varying degrees of knowledge because of my role in the special education process and understanding how to best facilitate the sort of educational and functional progress that would really result in both of my children living independently, furthering their education, and being gainfully employed. Once my husband and I met another parent who connected us with our Parent Training and Information Center, which from now on I'm going to refer to as PTIs. We became more active in the IEP process and development, especially around transition components of the IEP. We started not just thinking about the annual IEP meeting and the goals in there that were just for that 1 year, but even at a young age, started thinking way out into the future and like life after special education. What was that going to be like? And we started focusing on the strengths that both of our children that had IEPs, what were their strengths? And how were those strengths going to develop and crystallize into employment? Eventually, we started thinking of things differently, and we brought those thoughts to the IEP meetings and developed relationship with the members of the team, and that was so important. So we learned to partner with the IEP team members. We learned to capitalize on the knowledge of the team. So we learned they're right there around the team, and parents should know this. There's years and years of experience right there. And unless you're open to asking questions and hearing input from them, sometimes people remain silent. The meetings are very short and scheduled. And so one tip for you is to always ask, bring your questions with you on your parent agenda and ask. So we did have other objectives aside from employment and living independently, like learning to use transportation, community recreation, relationships with people, because we knew networking was very important in the transition process. We knew that friendships were important, and we knew that sometimes individuals with disabilities struggle to maintain their friendships and maintain the networks as they move out of the educational system. And all in all, we wanted our children to be happy. So we were looking at happiness in the end. And we knew that we would be the responsible party if our children continued to need additional support. And parents just know that. So we attended trainings. We learned about independent living skills and the need for medication management, friendship skills and the importance of strong, maintained network of friends, networking for employment using social apps and the importance of sexual safety associated with dating, And with support, our children developed self-advocacy skills and began to participate more fully with the IEP team meetings. And eventually, they were able to partially run or participate very well in the meetings. So many details to think of, and that develop naturally for a child without a disability, and yet for our children that have an IEP, we may need to be mindful that they need discrete instruction to learn some of the skills that are necessary as they move along. Slide 2, please. Maybe this is slide 2. So who better than the parent or guardian to be the one to mentor a child as they grow up? They are the child's ally, and they play an important role that is lifelong. So when the parent fully participates in the IEP process, they share important information about their child that is always changing to help the team better understand the current needs and the strengths of the child. And this information improves the ability of the team to provide an appropriate special education program for that child. And it's so important to know that learning self-advocacy skills are very important for their child with a disability as they move out of the public school system. School staff can ask parents to complete an inventory of their child's independent living skills at home and in the community, and to bring it with them to the IEP meeting to share. Slide 3, please. Next slide. So another important parent role is recognizing and sharing the child's strengths and reminding the members of the team to utilize the strengths when providing instruction. When advocating for the needs of a child in the transition assessment process, it's essential the IEP team members address all areas of need related to furthering education, employment, and independent living. The assessment staff must also identify the strengths of the child. But the parents provide vital information to the IEP team members to be sure to assess in all areas of need. So be sure to take into consideration the student's preference in careers and educational interests. Parents are such an important source of information about the current interest of the student, which may change more frequently than those expressed at a yearly IEP meeting. So parents can prepare for the IEP meeting and create a parent agenda listing what they plan to discuss and share. And some parents may be more involved than others, depending on the circumstances of the family. Educators may need to be more involved in encouraging an exchange of information from parents unable for a variety of reasons to be actively involved in the transition planning process. Next slide, please. So PTI staff, we get many, many phone calls from parents of transition age youth. And these are some of the issues that we may hear from parents. I could have put a lot of slides on that. These are kind of the key ones. Perhaps the child is a senior in high school and on track to receive a regular diploma, yet the parent newly comes to realize after coming to a training perhaps that there are many areas of independent living skills that are not addressed in the IEP. So it's like they might want to put the brakes on and think, well, when they'll call us and say, do you mean when I get a regular diploma, we no longer get any services? And we explain to them that process and how that's accurate information. So parents often share they're unaware of post-secondary options in the area in which they live. So educators that are listening to this call, have those resources available for families because they don't know to ask for them. And then when it comes time to graduate, sometimes they're unaware of some of the resources in the community. Some children have behaviors that interfere with employment that have not been addressed in the IEP. So hopefully through the process of coming to the Parent Training and Information Center, the parent will become knowledgeable about advocating for behavioral assessment and support so that the child would be more easily employed eventually. And we sometimes hear that transition age youth feel isolated and lonely, that they don't participate in extracurricular activities at school or in the community. And we encourage parents to talk about these problems with the IEP team and work on making sure they are addressed prior to the child earning a regular diploma and exiting eligibility from special education supports and services. Next slide, please. Sometimes we receive calls that deal with a child's dependence upon the parent for support, like completing classwork, homework, or both. And sometimes an over-reliance on help with independence living skills. And another area sometimes missed in transition planning are the needs for the soft skills of employment. So another area is communication. Both written and verbal communication skills are very important in the workplace because they set the tone for how people perceive an individual. And the child may need augmentative alternative communication technology. If that's an area of need, that could be addressed through the child's IEP. And then to have the ability to work in a team. So teamwork is very important in employment. To be adaptable or have flexibility, but also to have problem-solving skills. Some children may need explicit instruction or accommodations around this. And then critical observation skills and conflict resolution skills, or options to request assistance if a conflict occurs during employment. So, and also leadership, ways to stand out or improve abilities. And then employers say that humility is an important quality, that we're really, they say that they're really dependent upon finding teammates who have the confidence to raise their hand and say, there's something I'm not understanding here, or I'm not sure how to be really effective and efficient at this point, because the employers say, that helps us know that we can continue to invest in learning and development. Next slide, please. So parents should share their child's dreams as well as the dreams for their child. Parents will need information, resources, or guidance from schools to support their child, and investing time equipping parents to advocate with and on behalf of their children in the area of employment is time well spent. The family members will be an enduring presence and a source of support for the students long after public school services and supports cease. Parents' expectations can make a real difference in whether students with disabilities of any kind are successful in finding paid employment, both during and after high school. Educators should let parents know about the value of early work experience, inform them about job-related school and community services available to their children, and ask parents about any concerns they might have. Parents can also ask these questions to their IEP team members, encouraging children to be responsible for some household chores, also can foster greater responsibility, and teach important work-related skills. Parents can involve their children in everyday conversations about their career interest and encourage active exploration of many different options for employment. Next slide, please. So some key tips toward understanding the role of self-determination in the transition planning process. It means understanding one's disability, advocating for oneself, setting goals, making informed choices, making decisions, expressing a desire to work, making positive statements about contributing to society through work, taking pride in one's work, staying on task, not giving up. And here are some communication and social skills that might benefit employment outcomes. Communicating needs and wants, making conversations, making eye contact, smiling, keeping personal space, greeting others, handling frustration and anger, getting along with others, and asking for help. Next slide, please. At each IEP team meeting, there's a consideration also for the need for assistive technology for the student, and this includes the transition planning meetings. Providing for proper technology and assistive technology needed by individuals with disabilities positively affects their independence and their access to and success in post-secondary education and employment. Self-determination and self-advocacy also go hand in hand. Students with disabilities need to learn to advocate on their own behalf, and to be effective self-advocates, they need to learn both how to advocate and what to advocate for. So the first step is to educate the student about their rights and responsibilities under IDEA, their civil rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act Amendment Act, or more generally, the rights available to all citizens. And after empowering, in an empowering way, educators can help to connect a family with resources to understand their role in the transition process by connecting the parents with their local PTI. Next slide, please. So each parent training and information center may do some things differently. So if I were to tell you all the specific things that PHP did, you may not find exactly the same things happening at a different PTI. So you need to contact your own local PTI to see what kinds of supports and services they might be able to provide. Each one of the PTIs address and reflects the needs of the families in the counties covered, and some provide training and information, and others might provide support groups or information about in-home support services or SSI or guardianship. So look to the PTI that covers your county. Each one of them is going to have a website to look to. They will provide information about IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, on the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, and the ADAAA, as well as information on the importance of self-advocacy. So each one is unique, and they receive specific county-specific grants to fund special projects. So it's useful to visit their website for information if one is available. Sign up for their newsletter. Parents truly appreciate when school staff share important information with them that helps them improve their advocacy skills and especially the outcome for their child. Next slide, please. So PTIs help connect families and youth to organizations that are disability related in the community the PTI covers, and there's trained staff there to share information about youth and parent rights. And we want to be sure to share the websites, so I put the websites on a few slides down so you'll see them on a map there. Another role of the PTI is to increase the parent's capacity to help their child with disabilities improve their early learning, school-aged, and post-secondary outcomes, to increase knowledge of educational and early learning options, and the very important role of increasing youth with disabilities capacity to be effective self-advocates, a critical skill for further education and employment as well. Next slide, please. So the resources provided at a PTI can increase a parent's capacity to effectively support the children with a disability and participate in their child's education. The resources assist parents to make informed decisions when choosing educational and early learning options and to meet the needs of their child. They provide information about how to communicate effectively with the school staff and administrators and work in a partnership and collaboratively. And they provide information and resources to resolve disputes effectively and encourage family to actively participate in school reform activities to improve outcomes for all children. They may offer support groups as a way to get peer support, and they help parents make informed decisions when choosing educational options that best meet the needs of the child, help children meet developmental and academic goals, help the children meet challenging expectations established for all children, and prepare their children to achieve positive post-secondary outcomes and live lives that are as productive and independent as possible. In addition, the parent centers help youth with disabilities to understand their rights and responsibilities and learn self-advocacy skills. Next slide, please. So the link on this slide allows you to go to a website which will list the parent training centers in any state in the United States. And then I wanted you to know that the majority of the staff that work at a parent training and information center are also parents or siblings of a child with a disability, and that we're looking forward to hearing from you. You can find the phone numbers and contact information on the slide with the map, and it'll give you all the websites too, and it also gives you the names of the community parent resource centers called CPRCs in the state. And thank you so much for joining us for the webinar today.
Thank you so much to all of the presenters for sharing your experiences. They were not only informational, but inspirational. Please remember to complete the survey link that is in the chat. It will also be sent out to participants after this webinar. We hope to see you next week for secondary transition collaboration. Thank you for being here.